Hello again, Pastor Jeremy, just here back with you for January 2nd, 2020. I'm looking at Genesis 5 through 8. This is day 2 of our Daily Bread Bible study, and you can find the other links there on our social media page. You can see it on the website that I've created for this specific thing, and being able to find all of this information. So let's dig right into it. We look at Genesis chapter 5, and we see of bridging two key figures. We're trying to bridge, the first family of Adam and Cain and Abel and Seth, and then coming down to go over to this Noah character. And so chapter 5 is all the ancestry getting back there. Now, I'm not very versed in Hebrew, but there's a lot of Hebrew names that are puns. So like in English, we might have some different names that are kind of punny names, but here in Hebrew they especially do that. So I'm sure there's much more significance than I am really able to unpack through all of these different characters here in the Bible. But what we have next up on chapter 6 is Noah. So we see that God encounters a problem, that the sin of this first humans is just kind of running rampant. That the first family, Adam and Eve, pointed fingers at one another and disobeyed God, and that that God, as he was trying to coach Cain to not kill Abel, to not be jealous of him, to master his emotions, that Cain was not able to do that, and in fact, then ignored God's advice and suffered, because of that. And so God is kind of thinking about humanity, and it's just this humanity project's not going quite the way that he had hoped. And he says, my spirit shall not abide in mortals forever, for they are flesh, and their days shall be numbered. So he's trying to reduce and limit the amount of time that they will live after this supposed, taking for themselves, these, the sons of God taking the daughters of God. So it's interesting that he talks about this concept of this Nephilim, and that making these heroes of old, these warriors of renown, and these great interesting stories, which I think more about like Greek mythology and the Titans and all of that. And so maybe there's a little bit of flavor and variation on that for the biblical story too. But anyways, we see, continuing on in chapter 6, that in verse 5, now the Lord saw the wickedness of humankind was great in the earth, and that every inclination of their thoughts of their hearts was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he made humankind on the earth, and it grieved his heart. Poor God. God made these creatures, and it's just not going the way that God intended. So God kind of decides that, this project, we may just need to scrap it. And it's not going the way that I like. But through looking at the earth, he looks upon this one guy named Noah, and he has this kind of seed of hope. That he sees that Noah is a good man, and that Noah is different than the humanity that just keeps to be focused on themselves alone, and that Noah actually wants to listen to God and hear what God has to say. And so it says that Noah found favor in God's sight. But God had a problem. He had already resolved that he was going to flood the earth, and God wanted to get rid of the violence. And unfortunately, in this time, it's God's going to use an act of God in order to bring about that restoration of humanity. Give humanity another attempt and try it. And so God's going to take his hands at this destruction through this flood. God is making a decision as God is grieved. God preserves Noah and his family and invites all the animals to come into the ark. And so this Noah and the ark story is here in chapter 6, as we see that Noah creates this huge ark to be able to contain two of most of the animals of the world, and even extra of some animals as well too. And that God leads them and protects them and sends the flood in chapter 7, opens up all the water to cover the earth. And we see that Noah and his family are saved through that flood. God remembers Noah and provides for him and keeps him safe for those 40 days and 40 nights there as the ark is there in this gigantic flood, as the rest of humanity is essentially getting wiped away. I wonder what's happening with God at this time. Maybe God is feeling bad about the decision to wipe away humanity, the sense of violence that has to come in order to be able to achieve what God is, hoping for. But we don't quite have privileged insight to what's, going on with God quite in that way. But we see that after the end of this, after they finally are able to come out of the waters and the flood, that God kind of says, that was not what I wanted, but I will promise that I will never again destroy the earth by a flood in that way. And so that's where we get, in leading off in chapter 9, we'll pick up with the covenant of Noah at the end of that time. So if you have any questions, connect with us. Love to be able to connect with you on any social media, and you can see on our website the ways in which you can be able to connect, and just reach out to us and we'll be happy to talk a little bit more and in depth about some of these particular points of verses. So thank you for joining me for January 2nd, 2020.